Revolution Radio proudly presents, live from the heart of the Blue Ridge, Roanoke, Virginia. It's the Just Bernard Show with host Bernard Alvarez. Join Bernard as he shares topics that reveal the real matrix and empower your human experience, including world liberty, the esoteric, suppressed technologies, spiritual ascension, and human consciousness. Humanity has awakened, and our time has come to realize our full potential. And now, live from the Star City, your host, Bernard Alvarez.
Like I said, Dwaine Hartman is a trainer. He is the co-author of the book Value Your Vibration, a world lecturer, and the facilitator of Awaken The God Within tour. And that's hopefully we'll be talking a little bit about that today. So welcome to the show, Dwaine. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a delight to be on your show and to speak with you.
And we're very glad that you were able to make it. Thank you so much. Now, Dwaine, as I said, you've become very well known in the work. I guess our work kind of is very similar in the sense that you're teaching or you're helping people to awaken to their true selves. And like the title of today's show is Awaken the God Within, is I guess a motivating factor in a lot of the work that you do. Can you tell us a bit about how you got started in the work that you do and what brought you to the place where you are today and I guess the drive to help awaken humanity?
Well, Bernard, I've had that drive ever since I was a kid. I could sense or understand the control matrix that was going on, controlling humanity, and I wanted to do something about it to be able to help people come back into the freedom that they are. I've had interesting experiences. When I was young, I had memory even to before I came here. I had this memory of seeing myself or feeling myself taking these two orbs and holding them to my chest and loving myself into being here. It was a weird thing, but
oh wow!
I remember coming here. I was kind of freaked out my parents a little bit because I brought this through with me, but I could always feel that there was a control going on here, and I started as soon as I was old enough to talk and to start talking about it. Of course, when a child talks about it, people kind of just think it's cute, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but as I went through life, I was very, very connected in the beginning, and then I hit the school system, which really tries to tear the whole imagination out of you, which is, in my understanding, and what I feel is actually the porthole that we need to be able to open to create our own reality differently, is that imagination. And
yes.
You'll hear it a lot, with people. They'll say, "Oh, that's just imagination," and to me, that's so defeating to themselves to discount their own imagination, because we can actually shift reality by doing that. So, like I say, I kind of, I knew this growing up, and then by the time that I could actually do something about it, that's when I got interested in hypnotherapy. Why? Because I could see the hypnosis that was going on, and I wanted to learn hypnotherapy so I could understand how they were hypnotizing humanity, and so that I could assist with the de-hypnotizing process, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's when I became a hypnotherapist. But I work it differently. I call it the Hartman Approach, which is my last name, but it's a different approach to hypnosis, to hypnotherapy, and it's more about deprogramming people that are in the matrix, right? Control matrix.
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I speak of that often. I speak about the idea, well, not the idea, the reality that we all have been programmed, whether it be through society, whether it be through school, whether it be through our peers and even our parents, even though they don't mean to. We become socially conditioned to believe we are less than what we are. And Dwaine, so can you tell us perhaps some examples of how, or what you've seen, how people have been hypnotized by quote unquote the Matrix?
You know what, Bernard? We have to go all the way back in time to the time of Zeus.
Ah.
And there, if you look it up, it's written that Zeus put humanity in a state of hypnosis and split them in two. Together we stand, divided we fall.
Yes.
Well, he was jealous that humanity was going to come into the God consciousness he was in. And so he did something to ensure that didn't happen, so that they had a dualistic nature. And so there's one thing that I do in my programs is to assist people to remove the critic, because the critic stands in between your God consciousness and your socialized trance, is what I call it, the socialized trance. And that's that trance you were talking about, Bernard, where they're not in their full potential. Something's happened. People don't recognize their full potential. They're not entering into that full potential. And there's a reason for that, because they're hypnotized out of it. The critic sits in the middle between God consciousness and the socialized trance that we're in. And anytime we get close to God consciousness, it bats us back with ridicule, back into the socialized trance. You'll never be accepted, and all of these things. So a big play was made on the fact that we were nomads, and if we were outside of the group, we were dead, right? Yeah. Back in those days. So they're playing on these ancient kind of beliefs that, you're not okay by yourself, right? But we're really moving into this time now where we have to come into our sovereignty as an individual self in our own power. People need to move into that aspect to be able to evolve to the next level. Yeah, that's what I think.
Yes, absolutely. And I agree with you completely. When you say evolve into the next level, we all speak of, well, those of us doing the work that we do, Dwaine, we all talk about, we use different terminology, the fifth dimensional awareness, ascension, enlightenment, illumination. What does that look like to you? What is this new paradigm, or at least individually, what does that look like to move to the next level?
Well, people that experience this God consciousness awakening describe it, like whether it's in personal sessions or whether when I'm on tour doing it, they experience this aspect of moving into this consciousness and being superior to their own social consciousness. They feel this. If we don't have a place to go, we can't go there. Back in the day, that was my kind of, say about 10 years ago, when I was doing a lot of radio back then and trying to move people into fifth dimensional consciousness and being an example of that, because without that example, they can't imagine themselves there. So if they can't imagine themselves there, they can't go there, right?
Yeah.
Because they have no place to go into, and the mind absolutely abhors a void. It doesn't like the void. So we have to build or construct that. So what that fifth dimensional aspect looks like is much more clarity. We have to move into a a higher level of self-empowerment, to be able to say yes and no to things and stand unwavering to that. That's part of moving into this fifth dimensional energy. What I experience with it is this fifth dimensional energy, when we move into it, we become very, very aware of what is diverting us and what is on our own personal path with source energy or the God within. And it's very easy for us to say, no, I'm not doing that because that's diversion, or I'm doing this, right, instead. So we have that strength to be able to say that. That's one aspect of it. And once we do that, we realize that, we are actually these immortal beings, not mortal beings, that we've always been here. I mean, in the universe,
Mm-hmm.
and we're not temporary. That takes a big clout out of the matrix and the control, is when you understand that you're eternal, that you've never been born, nor will you ever die, that this aspect of you that is the life force that's in you is eternal. And so that really assists people in seeing their own consciousness that they have developed. It's almost like a mask, a societal mask that they put on, that they're superior to that. Now, they could start to look at different things like healing themselves or raising vibration or all of these things much easier in that state, right?
Yes.
So I hope I answered your question.
Yes, very much, and of course that leads to more questions, and one of them to me is, what are some of the pitfalls that we see as we are going through this quote unquote awakening process? I'm going through the awakening process. You, Dwaine Hartman, are going through it. Treva Lynn is going through it, and I would feel. I think it's fair to say probably hundreds of thousands, if not millions of us are going through this process either spontaneously or through the aid of teachers like myself and yourself helping us along. But we still fall into these pitfalls where either the quote unquote critic, as you stated, comes in and kind of pushes us back, or a some type of distraction, whether it be financial or medical or emotional kinds of pulls us back into believing the illusion, even if it's for a short time. But there are pitfalls along the way, and what are some of them, and how can we either circumvent them or stay grounded within our source consciousness?
The first thing is to remove the critic. The critic is not part of you. The critic is a program. And you had mentioned prior to that this gets handed down through generational, through school, through all. This program that we have inside of us is a program. Babies aren't born with a critic. Babies are born loving. And so it's not part of the human makeup, but it is introduced into us, this self. It starts out with self-criticism. It starts out with criticizing self and pushing away anything that has to do with magic and miracles. And this is the whole God consciousness aspect that gets pushed away. Now, what are the pitfalls? The pitfalls, first of all, are the critic. Secondly, as we're moving through, we want to be aware of what takes our vibration down and what takes our vibration up. There are some things that are out there on the net when it comes to getting people upset about certain things, conspiracies, whatever. And I'm beginning to look at that as, is this a way to keep us off our path, which is focus. If we focus, we're the creator of our own reality. If we focus on what it is we want, but yet, I have a warrior within me, a great one. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had the power to even do this, right?
Yeah.
But there's times I have to haul myself in and say, Dwaine, this vibration, this frustration with what's going on with the control matrix is not taking you where you need to go. You need to be able to focus on what it is that you want to see as a reality, right? So my rendition of this is that we're still those original gods that we always were. It's just that our awareness is getting diverted to different things. If we brought it back home where it belongs, we create our own reality. I know that a lot of people say, well, that's like putting your head in the sand, but really it isn't. If you're manifesting your own reality and everybody caught on to that, we would leave war and all of this behind, because from what I understand, they can't create reality. They need us to do it for them. So the best way to get us to do it for them is to get us to believe that we're fighting something, and they're the power, right? The quickest way to disempower, say, that matrix is to understand that you create your own reality and you can manifest yourself out of it. And then the trap is over, right? But that's another pitfall, is that us as warriors, we have a tendency to want to go to war with this, go to war with that. But I'm beginning to really question that at some point here, Bernard, because I don't know if it's diverting me. 4D is a very tricky place.
Yes.
and there's many ways to try, and it's all about diverting human consciousness to feelings of being powerless, right? And when we do have the power to just change our own reality, my thoughts are, if we caught on to that concept, that we change and we create our own reality, and we can create our reality out of this, we'd be out of here very quickly.
Yes, absolutely. And I can't help but notice, first of all, let me reiterate everything you just said, because I feel exactly the same way. I myself have been picking up on this, and I'm noticing as well, we're seeing it in the activist world. I just talked about Democracy Spring, and the whole idea of demonstrating for what you want. Yesterday and this week, Democracy Spring is demonstrating that they want money out of politics. They want lobbyists out of the election process, versus, several years ago, even prior, throughout the movements we look at, even the anti-war movement or the anti-GMO movement or the anti-anti, we're seeing the language changing into celebrating and creating that of which we want to create. And I love what you said of getting rid of the critic and knowing that anything is possible, because what was considered far-fetched, 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, the idea of no war, the idea of no predatory capitalism was considered, oh, you're crazy. We can't live like that. And now people are like, yes, we can live without war. Yes, it is possible. So I really feel with what you're saying, and I'm aligning with what you're saying. Any comments on that?
Well, again, and it's getting, we've noticed here that there's more and more exposure as to who the real enemy is, right? Instead of, that race of people over there, no, or these people over here, no, it's not that either, because they're just people like you and I.
Yeah. Dwaine, we're having a commercial break right now. Hold that thought, and when we return, we're going to continue our...
And now, back to your host, Bernard Alvarez.
And welcome back to the Just Bernard Show here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Today we are speaking with Dwaine Hartman about awakening the God within. And before the break, Dwaine was just talking about how the dynamic is changing, the idea of quote unquote the enemy, they. Dwayne, I was contemplating this well during the break, and I'm wondering when we look at the concept of they, we seem to well, actually, let me take that all back. When we're having our awakening, as we're having our awakening, and we come to the realization that things are not the way we thought they were, that we realize that we've been tricked, that we've been manipulated, that we've been, basically duped by the power structures that be, there is a certain sense of I don't know if you want to call it an embarrassment, that maybe we're embarrassed that we've been duped for so long, or there's that anger that we've been lied to, and a lot of that comes out in the very beginning through anger and whatnot. But I feel that a part of the process as we are awakening the God within, that we learn to move past that and to heal that. I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on how can we heal the fact that we were lied to, either whether intentionally or unintentionally, by our parents, by our government, by our religion? Is there some pointers that you could give us to perhaps reconcile this idea of being lied to for so long?
Well, the the thing of it is that you're absolutely right here in this, that you do when you first come out of disempowerment. You need an energy to bring you out of disempowerment, out of the sleepy state. And when you pop out of that, the first thing that you experience is anger when you come out of disempowerment, right? And then on the emotional scale, you move from disempowerment to anger, and then from anger to frustration, because you realize in part you did it to yourself.
Yeah.
And then from that, then you move into hope, because from frustration, you move into hope that if you created this, then you can create something different. And then from hope, then you move back into your connection with source, the God within. So that's the emotional scale. So yes, there is a aspect of where we first pop out, we get angry, but then we start looking at this anger and going, okay, well, this also was dragging me back into something. Is I have to fight something that I'm also disempowered by this that's happening, right? And then I have to fight. But then you realize that really it's a war on consciousness. It's got very little to do, and it's hard to believe, but there's very little to do here about money. What they're really after is emotional states and keeping humanity in an emotional warble of feeling that they're disempowered. When we step back into our own power, then we realize that this game has been a facade, really, right? And that it's us that's joining it, or we can step out and start creating it differently. We can create something differently. Like I say, that the they that we talk about, I've heard many times that they don't have the power to manifest their own reality, that they need us to do that for them. And remember, they don't mind negative energy because a negative energy still creates, right? So we start looking at that, and I'm not going to say that, I'm 100%, because I still get riled when I see something unjust, right?
Absolutely.
But these are some of the things that we want to pay attention to, is that there is another emotional level beyond anger. We can go into frustration, and in the frustration, we realize that frustration is that if we allowed this to happen, then we can take our power back. And that's the big thing that needs to happen right now, is humanity needs to take their power back from being convinced that they're weak, or that they can't, there's nothing that they can do, they're just little.
Yeah.
That's so out there, because the thing is that that's exactly, I mean, they're using your ability to manifest to create their own world, right? And it's very, very tunnel vision world, you know? Like with a lot of my clients that I'm working with, you know, they say, well, you know, if I'm out here thinking these thoughts, I'm bizarre or I'm weird. And I just say, well, weird is the new normal. Because if you really step out there and from that God consciousness point of view, what really looks weird? Well, what really looks weird is that you voluntarily send your children off to war.
Yes.
That looks pretty darn weird.
You can say that again.
Knowing what result that'll be. And none of us want that. None of us want to send our children to war. None of us want that. And why do we do it? Why do we condone it? Why don't we just stop going to war? Right? You know, it's somebody else's ideas, right? You know, like that. The people that I meet people all over the world, and all different races, and all of them would invite you in, you know, for supper, and want to get to know you. It's not people that want to war. It's these ideas, right, of creating this havoc in the world, right?
You can say that again. Absolutely. And speaking of hypnotism and some of your clients, tell us a little bit about the process, a little bit of the Hartman method. What does that entail? What are some of your goals when you're doing these hypnotherapy sessions, and how can that help an individual?
My biggest thing is that I want to help people come out of this matrix, this control matrix. And the first thing is that I teach them a method of dropping in with their eyes open. Like I say, I've changed a lot of things. I found that by going into deep trance, for myself personally, for de-hypnotizing, the deep trance wasn't as helpful. I want them to have open-eyed trances so that they can actually bridge between this greater part of their mind and themselves consciously, so that there's a bridge and not a disassociation. In deep trance, they go into a deep state, and then they come out of that deep state into the conscious aspect of themselves, and they may or may not remember even, right? And so my goal is not to have a disassociation take place. My goal is for them to meet this greater being that's inside themselves. Like I often say, you know, the magic is within you. I'm like the source whisperer. I just bring that out of you, right? And people start changing their lives with it. And so some of the processes that I go through, first of all, is removing the critic. We also take a look at their timeline and what's dragging them down in the past. And I've come up with very swift and easy ways to go back there and have them re-empower themselves out of a situation or whatever, so that these aspects of us reacting to the world, in a sense, like a reaction, and starts to soften, right? Mm-hmm. And it's not so how would you put it? So reactive anymore. Yeah. And the whole goal is to get the vibration in the present moment as high in frequency as possible, right? Because we don't want anything dragging down. So that's what, you know, I work with to help them to come into this higher state within themselves. And then I teach them techniques as well on how to raise their vibration really quickly. Vibration is feeling, and the feeling is what's manifesting our reality. And so this is why I've come up with techniques that assist people to free themselves from those past hurts and pains and things quickly, because I don't want to interrupt with the present moment vibration that they've got going by going and revisiting and hashing over these things. We need to go back there swiftly and thaw them out, heal them quickly, and then come back to the present moment vibration and raise that vibration. once they raise that vibration, then they can start looking at is stepping into this greater aspect of themselves. I work with that God within the whole time throughout the sessions, whatever sessions they have. I'm always calling upon that aspect of them to do the healing. It's not me doing the healing. I'm not a healer. The God within that person is the healer, right? And so it all comes to bringing them back to this greater relationship with themselves.
Sounds,
Does that answer?
yes, that sounds wonderful, and I thank you for that. I think it's important for people to hear, the type of techniques that are available. And by the way, if people are interested in contacting you and maybe setting up a session, how would they go about doing that?
Just come to innerbalancehypnotherapy.com.
Innerbalancehypnotherapy.com. Very good. And of course, you're on Facebook as well, which is where I found you.
Dwaine Hartman, and it's Dwaine, Dwaine, and Hartman.
Very good. Yeah. Now, Dwaine, I was reading that we have some similarities. I don't know how old you are. I'm thinking we're pretty close to. We're both about the same age. During my early 20s, I had a quote-unquote out-of-body experience where I was taken upon a craft with light beings, whether we want to call them transdimensional or extraterrestrial, and I was, shown, what was wrong with the world, and I was brought to the source consciousness, and I was told that I needed to go back to Earth and show people the way back to source. That's very similar to your story. Can you tell us a bit about what happened to you?
Well, when I was a kid, I was very, born awake. When I hit the school system, of course, they told me I was learning disabled and all of these things. And I went through the rigmarole there, which kind of shifted my feeling on myself. And then I started, partying, because partying was a better feeling than that feeling, right?
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, one day, going up to a work site, I was in construction, and going up to a work site, we seen this silvery cloud in the sky. And from behind the cloud came this light. There was 3 of them. One came out, went around. Another one made a wider berth. The third one came out and came in behind the car. And when it did, I wasn't there anymore. It picked me off the road like a strawberry. And I was all of a sudden in this ship, a dimension, but someplace anyway. And to me, it felt like a ship.
Yeah.
And these beings they floated in. They didn't walk. They just kind of floated up to us. And they would tilt their head to one side, and when they did, they would communicate. Now, they were shining such a golden light, you could hardly make their features out, but the love that was coming from them was phenomenal. It was just a phenomenal feeling of love. And they would look at you, and out their third eye and out their heart, there would be this communication that was happening, and their mouth wouldn't move, but you would feel the communication. And that's exactly the same thing, Bernard, that they were sharing with me. They were sharing with me that there was going to be a great control coming soon, and that we needed to be able to help people free themselves and come back to their own source energy, their own divine sovereignty again. And they were very adamant about that. And they showed me how, things weren't solid here, that what we think is reality is not solid at all. That's very flexible, and that each individual person has every right to have their own reality. These sorts of things.
Yeah.
Now, when remember I was saying I was a partier. Well, yeah. I after this experience that I had, I decided I would go to a bush party again a few days or a few months later or whatever. And I was standing there at this bush party, and I was standing on the outside ring, you know what I mean? Like everyone else was closer to the fire,
Right.
and I was standing on the outside for some reason. And I felt something, and I turned around, and there was this native man that walked out of the bush, a native man with full leathers. That's odd to see at a bush party. But anyway, this man walked out, braids, walks up to me, and he says, "What are you doing?" And I says, "Oh, we're having a party here." And he said, "No, what are you doing?" And I went, "Oh."
Oh.
And so what it was that they were just kind of keeping an eye on me to make sure that I wasn't going to go astray again, I guess. So I left that world. I left that world of partying and whatnot, and I continued down this path, Yeah. But that's the experience.
Very interesting. And I can't help but notice, I mean, I hear your story and my story and the story of so many of us that are doing this work and how they really parallel each other. So many of us have been through very difficult hardships. So many of us went through the partying phase. So many of us had these visitations from light beings. And I can't help but wonder, what the big picture is. Is this a mass awakening being perpetrated upon humanity at this specific time for a particular reason, and it's also beautiful to me.
So you're not from here, Bernard?
That's what I'm told.
But you did come here to change the vibration.
Yes.
And there's so many of us in human form. Back in the 40s sometime, there was one of your presidents that was able to meet with the aliens, and they asked them, why would you do this? Why would you create a slave planet, And there wasn't much that president could do because, of course, there was behind that yet. But they made a decision back then that the vibration needed to change on this planet because it is affecting all other planets. And plus, we're the living library. And so they started to be born in human form to be able to change the vibration, because they couldn't change it by just negotiating with the leaders.
Yeah.
They had to change it by coming in and entering. And that's why you were picked up, Bernard.
It seems to be.
So that you would remember who you are.
And it's a constant, I won't say a struggle, but it's a constant effort. There we go. It is truly an effort to continue to remember. And I'm so grateful that we are remembering. I'm so grateful that so many of us are here at this time doing this work that is so needed for humanity. And with that being said, Dwaine, what are some of your thoughts now moving forward for humanity as a whole? I understand how we have to do the internal work individually. I understand how it's important for us to reconnect with our higher selves, our higher consciousness, our God within. But for humanity as a whole, what are you seeing coming as this story unfolds? What are your thoughts of what some of the priorities need to be, and et cetera?
Some of the priorities would be less attention on what's happening outside and more attention on what's happening inside. Because when you change the inside, you're changing the outside. And this is one of the big lies that was sold to us, that everything is coming at us when it's actually coming from within us. That we have that ability within us to change our vibration, and when we do, we affect the whole of social consciousness. I was sharing with somebody here not too long ago who was explaining what an empath they are, and that they pick up all this energy. And I said, yes, and at the same strength that you pick this energy up, you can also project. because that's what an empath can do. They're connected on a feeling level this way. And we all have that ability, though. When we're entertaining thoughts, we're entertaining our own sense of freedom, these sorts of things, we're infiltrating that social consciousness with those vibrations. And that's how come we came here. And so is that kind of what you mean?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's something I agree with completely. I feel, while we must work against external injustice that we see happening around the planet, and at least,
Yes.
speak up when it's brought to our attention. One of the things that I've learned, especially over the last decade or so doing this work, is that sometimes universe presents us with contrasts of what we don't want in
Yeah.
order for us to clarify what it is that we do want.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very funny, though, how, a lot of people within the metaphysical spiritual movement are very weary of focusing on what they don't want. And I find that, there is a humanity shadow self, or a shadow self of humanity that that we need to have a relationship with, perhaps, instead of trying to, stuff it down and make believe it's not there and whatnot. I feel it's very unhealthy and very unbalanced to do so.
We need to be able to do it in a way that it doesn't suck us back in. Yes. But yes, we need to do it. We need to stand strong in the center of that and say, no, you've had your way with me. That's it. But I will tend to you and I will look at you, because that is our power to move forward too. And so a lot of people say to me, I have had this horrific childhood and everything happened like you would have never, well, you probably can imagine all the things that you hear about how humans treat humans.
Yes, unfortunately. And unfortunately, we are out of time. How quickly this time has come upon us. I want to thank you, Dwaine, so much for joining us today. And everyone, we will be back next week. I'll be doing one of my consciousness talks. And we love you. Have a wonderful week, everyone.